I think I just remember the pit in my heart whenever my mother said, your sister's been shot and she's dead. And it just stung like I've never had anything hurt before.
For the first time, we're hearing from those closest to Tierra Binion, the 25-year-old mother who was shot and killed after she was beaten unconscious outside of a Florida bar. Now, Binion's sister Diamond Jordan is telling her story.
Seeing her blood on the streets of Pensacola is just such a raw and harsh feeling. They had just moved her body prior to me arriving to the scene, and I just remember getting there and screaming out in agony.
Officials say Binion was killed in the early morning hours of August 23rd in Pensacola, Florida. Binion was with friends at the Jugs bar along the city's scenic highway. According to court documents, quote, an unknown black male wearing a black shirt and gray shorts approached Binion and another woman, talking about their bodies. The pair told the man to stop and keep walking, but he kept harassing them. Sometime later, a fight broke out between Binion and 24-year-old Rachel DeRise. Officials say a witness called the argument a, quote, brawl, telling law enforcement she, quote, observed people start shoving each other in front of the building. Jordan says she's still unsure what led up to the fight, but believes her sister had good intentions.
I think that Tierra would have stood up for herself and her friends, and I think that that's what happened in this situation. I think that, as an individual, you pride yourself as a mother, as a friend, as a daughter, as just a human being to not be talked down to and to hold your ground. And I think from the interviews that I've done personally with the people who were there, it seems as though Tierra was trying to de-escalate a situation whenever this couple approached her and she tried to stand up for herself.
Court documents note the witness, quote, observed DeRise on the ground being dragged by a female. At some point, the argument escalated further to include DeRise's boyfriend, 25-year-old Christian Ketchup. Court documents show Ketchup pulled out a gun before knocking Binion to the ground. After that, DeRise jumped on top of Binion and began hitting her. Next, officials say Ketchup drew his firearm and fired multiple rounds. After that, he and DeRise took off. Ketchup later called 911 and turned himself in. DeRise was arrested the following day. Jordan notes Binion was outnumbered in this fight.
This was not a female-on-female altercation. This was a female and male versus one female altercation. And I think that Tierra would have stood up for herself. I do not think that she would have instigated this situation because she is a mother and she prides herself on being a mother. And I don't believe that she would have instigated this altercation. I think that she was probably standing up for herself.
Jordan says at the time of her sister's death, she was in the process of enrolling in the military. She had hopes of either joining the Navy or the Air Force.
She was also enrolled in medical school and was doing classes and taking care of twin boys at the same time. And she had a good relationship with them. I know that, while she was down in Pensacola trying to get a job and try to enroll in the military, that she was calling them constantly throughout the day and just trying to do her best to balance everything in this lifetime.
At the time, Binion was living between Pensacola and Virginia, where her husband Alex was staying with their two twin sons, 2-year-olds Giovanni and Jakari.
Giovanni and Jakari were identical twin boys. I remember the day that Tierra called me and she was like, Diamond, there's not one, there's two. And just how deserving she was of that as a mother to be able to celebrate life and double life, I guess, as she was pregnant and expecting twins. And she did such a good job having them and, taking care of them while her husband was on deployment, while she was by herself up in Virginia without any of her family. She did such a great job.
But prior to her move to Florida, Binion stayed with Jordan in Alabama. She remembers that time as an adventure.
She had lived with me for quite some time while she was working on that. And it was just an adventure. Tierra was just always making my children laugh, my husband laugh, like me laugh. She was just always adventurous and just kind of charming in a way. We were always smiling and laughing. There was never any downtime from those experiences. But Tia was just always like the light in the room. She was always smiling, always bubbly. I think I explained her to someone else as just kind of always looking for more. Like she was just always looking for happiness and joy and anything around her. She was just a really sweet spirit.
Jordan says she was shocked when news came of Binion's death.
I remember receiving that phone call and thinking that it would be, this late at night, the person that had called me, thinking that it would be an elderly grandparent of mine, not my sister of all people. And I think I just remember the pit in my heart whenever my mother said, your sister's been shot and she's dead. And it just stung. Like I've never had anything hurt before. It was just a feeling I've never experienced before. It's still a feeling that I don't quite know how to manage, because it's not someone that's expected to die of old age. They don't have, an ill diagnosis. This is not expected. This is somebody who is full of life and love and joy, and just, it was so unexpected.
After receiving the news, Jordan drove from her home in Alabama to Mugs and Jugs in Pensacola.
I drove as fast as I could to Pensacola. My mother was there. I had some other family there on the scene. I remember arriving to the scene and just not knowing what it is that I was about to walk into. I'm going to be so raw with you. Seeing her blood on the streets of Pensacola is just such a raw and harsh feeling. They had just moved her body prior to me arriving to the scene, and I just remember getting there and screaming out in agony because everything felt like such a blur. It was just kind of like, how in the world did this escalate to this situation, to her being shot not only once, twice, but 3 or 4 times.
In the days since her sister's murder, Jordan says she's had time to reflect, but still doesn't understand why her sister was killed.
As somebody with a firearm who knows how to handle that properly, I know what it takes to, pull a trigger during practice. And I can't imagine the ill will to continue to pull a trigger over and over and over again into the life of someone and choose to end that life.
Jordan says her sister knew DeRise and Ketchup, but only through a mutual acquaintance. Ketchup's attorneys tell Law&Crime Network he believed Binion was, quote, inflicting deadly force, or it appeared that she was inflicting deadly force on Ketchup's girlfriend. They also say Ketchup is not the man being, quote, lewd with the girls before the fight broke out. Instead, arguing Binion instigated a physical fight with that person before Ketchup even arrived at the bar. Jordan says that's no way to remember her sister.
I think that Tierra was loved by many. I think that, we all loved her in our own way, and she loved us in a different way, but she touched so many people, whether it was friends or family. She had friends and family from Virginia to Alabama to Pensacola that loved her and that she loved. And I just hope that we can all remember her as a mother and as a friend, and seek justice for this tragedy in her name.
Jordan believes her nephews don't yet understand what happened to their mother.
I think that her children don't fully understand the loss of her life, but to watch them point to her in a casket and say, "Mommy," is just such a harsh feeling, because that they know who she is, that they loved her, and that relationship has been terminated. And it's just such a hard thing to experience and to watch.
From here, she hopes for justice in her sister's murder.
I hope that both of these individuals realize the damage that their actions have caused.
After his arrest, Ketchup was charged with Binion's murder and is being held without bond. DeRise was arrested and charged with battery, but has since been released. Ketchup is expected back in court on September 15th for his arraignment. Reporting for Law&Crime Network, I'm Gillespie.